The night Petty Officer First Class Darius Okafor fired that flare, he wasn't thinking about tactics. He was thinking about his daughter's laugh. The specific one. The one she did when she caught him sneaking a second piece of cake. Half scolding, half delighted, the way only 9-year-olds can make you feel simultaneously ashamed and beloved. He'd been holding that laugh in his chest like a coal for 11 days. 11 days inside Kiener Province. 11 days of bad water, worse sleep, and a mission that had quietly, terribly gone sideways. The laugh was all he had left of warmth. He fired the flare anyway. It had started the way all catastrophic things start. Not with a bang, but with a decision that seemed completely reasonable at the time. The team had been inserted 6 clicks north of a village called Shirkale. 4 SEALs, 118 Delta Combat Medic on attachment, and a mission brief that used the word reconnaissance 12 times and the word danger 0. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb had read the brief twice on the helicopter. He folded it, put it in his left breast pocket, said nothing. Webb never said much. That was how you knew he was worried. The objective was simple in the way that objectives are always simple before the ground makes a liar of them. Identify a weapons cache rumored to be moving through the valley. Observe. Report. Extract. Nobody shoots anything. Everyone goes home to their specific versions of warmth. By day 3, they had identified the cache. By day 7, they had identified something else. The weapons weren't moving through the valley. They were waiting, and so were the men carrying them. 40, maybe 50 fighters, rotating in shifts across 5 separate ridgelines with the patience of people who had been doing this before most of the SEAL team had learned to shave. This wasn't a transit route. It was a trap, the kind built over weeks, the kind that required someone to know where and when and the kind that sat in Marcus Webb's chest like a swallowed stone. "We've been burned," he said, on the 8th night, barely above a breath. Not a question. Darius didn't answer. He didn't need to. They tried to extract on night 9. The valley had other ideas. The route they'd come on, a goat trail along the eastern ridge, tight and miserable and perfect for 4 men moving quiet, was gone. Not physically gone. It was still there, rocks and packed dirt and the smell of something animal. But 3 fighters had set up a position at the trail's narrowest point, and they were not moving, and they were not sleeping, and one of them had a PCAM machine gun that could turn that narrow trail into a very efficient hallway of death. West was worse. A ravine, 200 feet, no rope long enough, no time. North pushed them deeper in. South was Shirkale, the village, which may or may not have been the source of the burn, and going to the people who may have sold you for a conversation felt like a theological experiment Darius wasn't willing to run. So they waited. Night 9 became day, 10 became night 10. The medic, a lanky kid from Savannah named Price who'd barely said 50 words in 11 days, quietly stopped eating on day 10. Not from injury, from the math. He'd done the math on the rations and said nothing and just quietly stopped. Darius noticed. He split his own ration and left half next to Price's boot without a word. Price ate it, also without a word. That was the closest thing to tenderness the valley had offered them. On day 11, Marcus got hit. Not badly, not mortally, but the word not mortally does a lot of work when you're 6 clicks from the nearest medevac landing zone, and your medic is operating on 3 days of half rations in a shallow hide site carved into a hillside. A scout, one guy, moving alone, probably doing a grid check, walked within 30 meters of their position. He shouldn't have seen them. They were disciplined. They were still. They were invisible in the way 4 years of training teaches you to be invisible. But Marcus's sleeve caught the light wrong. 1 second of sun on dark fabric. The scout yelled. Marcus moved. The round caught him in the left side, through and through below the ribs, missing everything vital with the indifferent luck of a universe that is not paying attention to your specific situation. Price was on him before the echo died, hands already moving, already working, talking under his breath in that low rhythmic way medics do when they're scared and covering it with procedure. Through and through, no cavity compromise. He needs fluids, and he needs out how long? Darius said, moving? For hours. Longer if how long if we stay? Price looked at him. Young face. Old eyes right then. You don't want that number. They moved. The fighter who'd spotted them was dead. Yusuf, their point man, had handled it before the yell finished, but dead scouts get noticed. Someone does a radio check. Someone walks the grid. And then there are 40 fighters on 5 ridge lines, and for SEALs moving wounded through a valley that has been waiting for them, and the math is the kind that makes your teeth hurt. They moved south toward Shirkale because it was the only direction left. 2 hours of movement. Marcus walking on his own for the first hour, Darius taking his left arm for the second. Nobody talking. The valley around them was the particular dark of high-altitude nights, the kind with no ambient light for 40 miles in any direction, the kind that makes you understand why ancient people were afraid of the dark, not as metaphor, but as simple geography. They found a compound on the village's northern edge. Empty. One room. Mud walls a foot thick. A single window facing the approach route. They were in it for 11 minutes before the first fighters appeared on the ridgeline to the east. Then, the ridgeline to the west. Then, the one directly north. Classic L shape, Yusuf said, with the tone of a man identifying a restaurant he's been to before and didn't particularly enjoy. They waited for us to go to ground, Marcus said. His voice was steady. His hand, gripping Darius's arm, was not. Smart. 3 ridgelines. 40 plus fighter. 1 wounded man. A medic. A point. And Darius. Darius looked at the flare gun in his hand. He'd been carrying it for 11 days. Standard kit. The kind of thing you carry because doctrine says to carry it, not because you expect to use it, the same way you carry the emergency tourniquet and the blood tie patch and the small laminated card with a number for chaplain. Emergency signaling device. For when all other comms fail. Their radio had taken a round during the movement. Not the radio itself, the antenna. Someone had done the math on their electronic signature and made a very targeted decision. No satelliticums. No way to call on their position. No way to tell anyone that they were in a mud-walled compound in Shirkale with a wounded chief and 3 ridgelines of people who had been waiting patiently, professionally, for this exact moment. The flare gun was not a communication device. The flare gun was a prayer. Darius held it, looked at Marcus, who was propped against the wall with Price's hands on his side, and his eyes very still, and his jaw very set. Do it, Marcus said, quietly. Not an order. Something closer to permission. Darius moved to the window. Somewhere on one of those ridge lines, someone was watching. Someone was waiting for movement. The moment he put the flare gun out that window, he was painting their position with a brush that the whole valley could see. He thought about his daughter's laugh. The specific one. He fired. The flare went up like a small, furious sun. Red. Arcing. Burning. The kind of light that rewrites the geography of a night. Shadows thrown in directions they don't belong. Rocks suddenly, outlined like stage scenery. The valley below, briefly, luridly visible. Darius pulled back from the window. The fighters on the ridgeline saw it. Of course they saw it. The radio traffic. Yusuf had one ear to a captured handset. Spiked. Movement sounds on the north ridgeline. Someone making decisions up there. They're going to push, Yusuf said. Yeah, said Darius. Marcus said nothing. His eyes were on the ceiling. Thinking something. Computing something in the quiet machinery of a man who had been in bad places before and understood, with clinical precision, exactly how bad this one was. Price packed the wound tighter. Said nothing. Did math in his head. The compound walls were foot thick and would stop small arms fire for a while and then stop stopping it. Outside, the valley waited. And then, from the ridgeline to the south, the one they hadn't been watching because it was behind them, the one that faced away from the fighters, the one that not a burst. Not a firefight starting. One shot, flat and clean and surgically timed from a position that shouldn't have had anyone in it. Darius was at the window before he decided to move. The north ridgeline. The fighter who'd been on the radio. The one coordinating. The one whose voice had been the most consistent in the capture handset traffic. The one Yusuf had quietly identified as the person making the decisions was gone. Not ducking. Not repositioning. Gone. The radio traffic stopped completely for 4 seconds. 4 seconds of silence on a hot net is a geological age. Then it erupted, not in orders, but in the specific panicked register of men who have lost their commander and do not yet know from where. South Ridge, Darius said. Yusuf was already looking, already squinting. There's nothing on the South Ridge. There is now. The second shot came 90 seconds later. The fighters on the west ridgeline had started moving, not toward the compound, but laterally, toward better cover, toward a position that would let them rake the compound's only window at an angle. It was a sound tactical decision, the kind a trained force makes automatically when their initial position is threatened. The man at the front of that lateral movement stopped moving, not because he chose to. The west ridgeline went still. Marcus had pulled himself to a sitting position against the wall. His face was the color of old chalk, but his eyes were doing the thing they did. That still, processing, nothing-wasted computation. Counting, he said. What? Darius said. He's counting something. A pause. A breath that cost him. The shots aren't random. He's dismantling something. Working a pattern. Pattern's going to run out, Yusuf said. There's 40 of them. There were 40 of them, Marcus said. The third shot changed the atmosphere of the valley. This is not a metaphor. The atmosphere of a combat engagement is a real thing, as physical as temperature. It has a pressure and a direction and a quality of attention, and when it changes, you feel it in your chest before you understand it in your head. Darius had felt it twice before in his career. Once in Ramadi, once in a village in Helmand whose name he'd never been able to properly spell and had never forgotten. The third shot hit a man on the east ridgeline who was setting up what looked, even at distance and in dark, very much like a mortar position. The mortar was not set up. The east ridgeline made a sound. A group sound, the sound of 40 individuals becoming suddenly uncertain, that carried down into the valley and through the compound walls and landed in Darius's sternum like a closed fist. They don't know where he is, Price said, quietly. Medic's voice. Clinical. No, Darius agreed. Do we? Darius looked south. The ridge was dark. The ridge was still. Whoever was up there was using the rock the way water uses a container, filling the available space, becoming the shape of it, invisible not through technology, but through patience and discipline and the specific stillness of someone who has done this before. He didn't answer Price. Some questions are better left as questions. The radio traffic from the ridgelines had shifted to something Yusuf was translating in real time, his voice low and factual, the way a doctor reads a chart. They're debating whether it's one shooter or a team. Debate is not going their way. A pause. Someone's calling for a withdrawal. Who? Marcus asked. Not the senior man. Junior. Getting shouted down. Another pause. Yusuf's jaw tightened slightly. Senior man wants them to push the compound. Use numbers. Force the problem. The word numbers landed in the compound the way that word always lands when you are 4 people with 1 wounded. Darius checked his magazine. Checked Marcus's, which was propped against the wall within arm's reach. Looked at Yusuf, who gave him the flat nod that means. Yes, I've done the same math. Yes, I know the answer. 40 fighters, even rattled, even missing 3 of their own, moving in a coordinated push against a 1-room compound with a single window. The South Ridge needed 4 more shots. They all understood that. Nobody said it. The 4th shot made history. Not in the official record sense. This engagement would be classified at a level that meant history was a word that applied to maybe 30 people total, most of them in rooms with no windows. But in the valley, in that specific geography of dark and rock and a mud-walled compound with 4 people in it, the 4th shot made the kind of history that rewrites the immediate future of everyone present. The senior man on the North Ridgeline, the one who'd been shouting down the withdrawal, the one whose voice had been the constant, the organizing principle, the reason 40 fighters had held their positions through 3 casualties and escalating confusion instead of melting back into the mountain. The voice stopped. Yusuf set down the handset. Carefully, the way you set something down when what you just heard is going to take a minute to fully arrive. Senior man is down, he said. Silence in the compound. Not the silence of 4 men saying nothing. The silence of 4 men understanding something at the same time. On the ridgelines, the debate that had been losing suddenly won. The junior man's voice, the one calling for withdrawal, rose in the handset traffic, no longer being shouted down, now being listened to, now being agreed with. The organized tactical unit was doing what organized tactical units do when they lose their commanders in sequence. They were reverting to the oldest military logic in human history. Leave, not rout, not collapse, but the controlled, deliberate leaving of men who have assessed the situation and concluded that the situation has become someone else's problem. They're pulling back, Yusuf said. Flat. Still not quite believing it. The South Ridge is still up there, Marcus said. His voice had something in it. Not quite wonder. Something adjacent to it. The specific register of a professional who has just watched someone else's craft performed at a level that lands in the chest. He's waiting, Darius said. He meant, the shooter hasn't moved. Hasn't revealed a position. Hasn't flagged or signaled or done any of the things you do when the threat is resolved, and you want the people you just pulled out of a bad situation to know where you are. He was waiting for the fifth shot, maybe, or for something else. They found out 23 minutes later. The fighters had fully withdrawn. Yusuf monitoring the handset traffic, tracking the retreat, calling it clinically until the traffic thinned and then stopped. The ridgelines were empty. The valley had the particular silence of a place where something had happened and was now over, the kind of silence that has weight and temperature and a specific smell of displaced cordite. Marcus was still against the wall, still chalk pale, still computing. We need to move, Darius said. Medevac window opens in 40 minutes if we can get to the LZ. Someone needs to go first, Yusuf said. Looking south. They both looked south. The ridge was still dark. Still. The shooter, whoever, whatever, had not moved. Had not announced. Had fired 4 shots in sequence. Dismantled an ambush with the precision of a man cleaning a workbench, and then gone back to being part of the rock. I'll go, Darius said. No, Marcus said. You're down. I'm down, not out. A breath. Controlled. Careful. Send Yusuf. Send Price. You stay with me. A pause, the kind that has words behind it. Someone needs to be able to shoot if that ridge is wrong. If that ridge is wrong. Darius looked at the south ridgeline. He thought about what a fifth shot would mean if it wasn't aimed at a fighter. Thought about it with the part of his brain that had kept him alive through 11 days in a valley that had been built as a trap. He thought about his daughter's laugh. He nodded. Yusuf and Price moved out of the compound. Low, careful, heading south, toward the ridge, toward the dark shape of the shooter who'd saved their lives from a distance without a word. Darius watched them go. Marcus watched Darius. You're holding something, Marcus said. Not a question. The tone he used when he was too hurt to be patient. My kids laugh, Darius said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then good thing to hold. The valley sat around them. Dark. Still. The particular quiet of a place that has finished doing what it came to do. Yusuf found him on the south ridge 12 minutes later. He called back on the secondary radio, the one they kept in a chest pocket for exactly the situations where primary comms get shot, and his voice had something re-words into the transmission. Darius felt the shape of what was coming the way you feel weather changing. Not the rain yet, just the pressure, the drop in something invisible, the body knowing before the mind catches up. Darius, come to the ridge. That was it. Come to the ridge. Not we've got him, or it's clear, or you need to hear this. Just those 4 words in a voice that had watched firefights go sideways and men go down and bad math come true and had never, not once in 2 deployments, sounded like that. Darius told Marcus. Marcus told him to go. He went. The south ridge was 40 meters of broken rock and loose shale that wanted to slide under your boots in the dark, the kind of terrain that demands full attention and gets it. Darius climbed with one hand on the rock face and his rifle in the other, and his brain doing the thing it does when it already suspects the answer, and is using physical effort to delay the moment of confirmation. He heard Price before he saw anything. Price was talking. That low, rhythmic medic voice, the one he used when he was scared and covering it with procedure. But slower now. Slower and quieter, the way the voice gets when procedure is running out of things to do. Darius came around a boulder. Yusuf was on one knee, facing away, rifle up, and scanning. Doing his job. The job was all he had right now. Darius could see in the set of his shoulders. That particular geometry of a man who is doing the only useful thing available to him, because the other things available are not useful. Price was on 2 knees. There was a man on the rock between them. The shooter was not what Darius had assembled in his head. In his head, during the 40-minute movement south, he'd been building a figure, some composite architecture of every high-value asset, every specialized capability, Every person he'd known who operated the way this person had operated tonight. Professional, isolated, invisible until needed. The kind of person the military invests decades into and deploys alone into the worst geography it can find. The man on the rock was old. Not old in the way that matters to administrative paperwork. Old in the way that the mountains of Kinner Province make people old, weather-cut, unhurried, carrying the specific weight of someone who has watched things happen in this valley that most people will never know happen at all. He was wearing civilian clothing. Local. A paycall hat pushed back from his forehead. No insignia. No unit markings. A rifle. A bolt-action rifle. The kind Darius recognized with the specific recognition of a craftsman seeing someone else's tools, propped against the rock beside him. 5-round gun. 5 brass casings somewhere on this ridge. His breathing was wrong. Not rapid wrong. The shallow, too controlled kind of wrong. The kind Price recognized from across a room and had clearly recognized from whatever distance he'd arrived at. Darius looked at Price. Price looked up at him. His hands were on a man's left side. Dark on dark fabric. The medic's face said everything. How long? Darius said. Barely a sound. Before the flare, or after? It took a moment. Before the flare. He'd been hit before the flare went up. He'd taken a round. 1 round from a scout or a position check or the same kind of bad sleeve, bad light moment that had tagged Marcus at some point before the red arc of that emergency signal lit the valley. And then he'd stayed on the ridge. And then he'd chamber round. And then he'd waited for whatever would require the south ridge to matter. And when the flare went up, 5 shots. For fighters. 1 organized ambush. 40 men who'd been patient enough to build a trap over weeks, and professional enough to almost close it. Dismantled. And now the man who'd done it was on the rock with Price's hands on his side, and his breathing wrong. Darius sat down next to him. He didn't know why. His legs just put him there. The man looked at him. Dark eyes. Unhurried. The kind of eyes that have been in this valley long enough to have made their peace with most of its versions. There was something in them. Not pain exactly. Pain was there, but not the primary thing. The primary thing was something Darius had seen in men who had finished doing what they came to do. You fired the flare, the man said. In English. Accented, careful, but deliberate. Each word chosen and placed. Yes, Darius said. I watched you for 11 days. Darius held that. 11 days. He'd been watching the same valley Darius had been dying in for 11 days, from this ridge, from this rock, from this exact position of invisibility and patience and the specific discipline of someone who knows that the moment to act is not the first moment or the loudest moment, but the right one. Why didn't you? Darius started. The man shook his head. Small. Definitive. The right time. That was all he said about it. The right time. Darius thought about day 3, when they'd found the weapons. Day 7, when they'd understood the trap. Day 9, when they tried to run. Day 11, when Marcus had bled and the radio had died, and the only communication device left was a prayer in the shape of a red flare. The right time. He looked at Price. Price gave him the smallest possible shake of the head. We're moving him, Darius said. Statement, not question. Yes, Price said in the tone that means it will matter and it will not be enough, and we do it anyway because the alternative is a thing we don't do. They came off the ridge with Marcus on one side, and this man, this unnamed, untimely, impossible man, on the other, Darius and Yusuf carrying between them, Price moving ahead, and behind in that medic's restless orbit of watching everything at once. The valley was empty. Genuinely empty now. The fighters had gone back up into the mountain with their dead, and their revised understanding of what this particular trap had cost them. The dark was just dark again, altitude dark, starful, the kind that in any other context would be beautiful. They made the LZ with 9 minutes to spare. Darius fired 2 more flares, the proper aviation signals, the ones that say position rather than emergency. 3 minutes later, the helicopter came in from the east, running dark, the noise of it arriving before the shape of it, that specific sound that is the most beautiful sound in any language when you've been in the wrong place for 11 days. They loaded Marcus first. Then, the man from the South Ridge. Price had stabilized him, held him more accurately, in that way medics do when stabilizing is the optimistic word for buying minutes. He was conscious. Barely. His eyes were still doing the same thing they'd been doing on the rock. Finishing, computing, finding the thing that needed to be seen before the light goes. Darius climbed in last. As the helicopter lifted, as the valley fell away below them, the compound shrinking, the ridgelines becoming shapes, the whole architecture of 11 days becoming just geography from this altitude. The man on the stretcher turned his head, looked at Darius, said something, voice barely there now, the sound of a sentence being built from whatever was left. Darius leaned in. He never told anyone exactly what the man said. He told the debrief team that the asset had been compromised and was extracted with the team, and that he'd been treated for a pre-existing wound sustained during the engagement. He used the words that debriefs require: clinical, sequential, scrub to the parts that don't fit in forms. He told Marcus, 3 weeks later, in a hospital room in Germany with a view of a parking garage and a get-well card for Marcus's 2 sons taped to the wall, that the man had died at Bagram. Quietly, without ceremony, in a way that certain people die when they have arranged for the important things to happen before the dying. Marcus was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said he was watching from day one. Before that, Darius said. Marcus looked at the ceiling, his particular computation face. He was waiting for us to need him enough. Darius thought about 11 days. About the specific patience of a man on a cold ridge with a bolt-action rifle and a wound he hadn't told anyone about, watching and waiting for the moment when the flare would go up and the right time would arrive. Yeah, Darius said. There's a photograph somewhere in a classified archive that Darius has never seen. He knows it exists because the debrief team mentioned it. Aerial surveillance, routine sweep, timestamp 40 minutes before the flare went up. South ridgeline, a shape that could be a boulder, or it could be a man who has learned to be the shape of boulders. In the photograph, if you know what you're looking for, you can see the rifle barrel, already pointed south, already waiting. He'd known the flare was coming before Darius had decided to fire it, had positioned himself for the moment, had absorbed a round and stayed on his ridge and built his 5 shots across 40 minutes of dark and patience and the specific love of someone who has decided that other people's survival is worth more than the accounting of their own body. 5 shots, not a burst, not firefight. 5 clean, surgical, devastating decisions, each one a domino, each one collapsing the thing that came after it, until the ambush that had taken weeks to build was a memory and a mud-walled compound, and for men climbing onto a helicopter. Darius got home on a Tuesday. His daughter was in school. He got there before the bell, sat in the car in the pickup line, engine on, heat running, hands on the wheel. The parking lot was loud with the specific noise of elementary schools at end of day. Kids with backpacks twice their size, parents on phones, the low-frequency hum of a world that has no idea about any of the things that happen in the places where the world is kept safe. He'd been in that valley 11 days. He'd been in this car for 12 minutes, and it already felt longer. The bell rang. His daughter came out with her backpack and her winter coat half unzipped, and the specific energy of a 9-year-old who has been sitting still all day and is furious about it. She was scanning the pickup line with the practiced eye of a child who knows exactly what her parents' car looks like. She found it. She found him. She ran. Not fast, not the movie run of someone covering ground. The run of someone who forgets to be controlled, who stops editing themselves, who just goes. Backpack swinging, coat flapping. The run of pure, simple forward motion toward a specific person. She hit the door before he'd finished getting out of it. He caught her. She was laughing. The specific one. The half-scolding, half-delighted one. Except this time, it wasn't about cake. This time it was about nothing, about the sheer physical fact of him being there and her being there and the math of that working out correctly. She was laughing and scolding him for being late. He wasn't late technically, but she'd apparently decided any amount of time he was not here was late, and he was holding her against his chest, and she was warm and loud and smelled like school lunch, and everything he'd carried in his chest for 11 days came up from somewhere below his ribs and behind his eyes. He did not cry. He came very close. He held her tighter than the moment strictly required. She didn't complain. He thought about the South Ridge on the drive home. He thought about a man who decided that the right time was not day 3 or day 7 or day 9, who'd watched from the dark with a wound in his side and a bolt-action rifle and the patience of a person who understands, in a way that most people will never have occasion to understand, that some moments cannot be forced and some help cannot be given until it is exactly needed. He thought about 5 shots. He thought about his daughter's laugh, the one he'd been holding like a coal for 11 days, the one that had been enough to fire the flare. He thought about the man who'd been waiting for the flare. He thought about the things that arrive in the dark from directions you weren't watching, from ridges that looked empty, from positions you would never have thought to check. The things that come not with announcement or insignia or the courtesy of letting you know they were there, that ask nothing in return except the particular faith required to fire a prayer into the dark and trust that somewhere on a ridge you cannot see, someone has been waiting for exactly that. He pulled into the driveway. His daughter was already talking about dinner, about a project due Thursday, about something a girl in her class had said. The current of her day, uninterrupted, continuing. The way life continues. He got out of the car, stood in the driveway, looked south, for no reason he could explain. The sky was just sky. Flat, blue-gray, suburban. No rielines. No dark shapes that could be boulders or could be something else.